Hello there. This is the second in our series looking at various components that make up a website. Today, we're talking about website navigation and why it's so bloody awful. The format for this series is that we'll first chat about the components and consider them from a UX design, accessibility, technical, and SEO perspective. Then we'll follow this audio-focused episode with a short YouTube video looking at code snippets and working examples. If you want the links for those, this show can be found at noscript.show/21. That's the numerals 21, noscript.show/21. And if you want some code examples, then head to noscript.show/learn/13. So the number's 13, noscript.show/learn/13. As always, the person that's doing the actual hard work on this podcast is David Walmsley. I just turn up and talk. Hello, David.
Hello. Well, this is really interesting because I thought, I can't do menus yet. There's so much with it. And there is, because we got a lot to get through. But it's been so fascinating because when I started trying to put some code snippets together for kind of components earlier on, I thought, I need this mega menu. I need these drop-down setups. I've got a whole bunch of things that I need. And doing this and doing a bit of research, particularly with the accessibility, I've just ended up going with another instinct of mine. Is that we really make kind of website navigation overly complex sometimes, and it's not always great for users and really hard technically to get right.
Yeah, you've put together on the webpage that I just mentioned, you've put together a really exhaustive list of all of the bits and pieces that go into a navigation menu, far more, in all honesty, than I'd ever thought about. Honestly, my position prior to reading your document was just put the headline things in and then create a sitemap and hope that Google will surface the content and kind of forget about it there. But there's a lot more to it, and it's really fascinating what you've thrown together. Shall I show the notes? Show the page? Okay, so here we are. So you'll be able to find this at noscript.show/21 if you want to. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, well, following the format we started with last time, we try and define what we're talking about with website navigation, and there really isn't a definition here with this one. So you can say I've listed a list that helps users to find associated pages and documents, because it's not always internal links. It can be external links, or it can be other documents like PDFs, or even some decide to attach Word documents even to the menus. Is it a table of contents? I mean, effectively, a table of contents on a website does the same thing, but we have perhaps generally a different view. Is it an ever-present menu bar? And often people call it menu. And that's, honestly, there's no real definition out there because the terminology is so difficult, I think, when we start talking about website navigation. So what some people will call navigational links, which is what I would generally call it these days.
Right.
Other people will call menus and buttons. And I don't know about you. I mean, with clients, sometimes you get this sort of mismatch of what you're talking about. They're saying the buttons on the top, I need them to be, you're thinking, right,
button?
then that.
There is no button. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Like, obviously, to you and I, we've probably settled upon a term that you like. I use menu interchangeably with nav. I shorten navigation always to nav. And when I speak to clients, very often the case was that, they would just use a different term, like a link or a button or what have you. And so those words are not out in the mainstream. So it's very difficult to define. But okay.
And I made a note here because I didn't appreciate this until I started doing this research on it, is the fact that if you're a developer, then menu is actually a specific technical term, which means that if you mark up your nav with menu, as give it a role of menu, then there are a whole bunch of expected behaviors that come with it. Like you should be able to use the space bar, the escapes key, the arrow keys, and all of that. So it's actually technically sort of a menu from a developer's point of view, or the role of menu is for those desktop applications. And in fact, screen readers switch to a different mode. So if you decide to use menu as a sort of technical role for your menu, you've got a whole bunch of responsibilities that go with that because the screen reader has a certain expectation. So fascinating. But then if you go and look at something like the Nielsen Norman Group, I think I've got it right way this time. Um, Norman Nielsen. Anyway,
we'll go with that.
yeah. So they're talking about patterns, usability, and how things will function for those. So they use the term menu bar for this constantly visible section that's on your top of your page that navigates people. And the navigation is kind of things that might come off that,
Can I just read the sentence that's written on the page in front of you there, just to show how interchangeable and weird the terms are? A type of navigation, so it's under the subheading of navigation bar. It says a type of navigation menu implemented as a menu bar hosting navigation categories. So they've used navigation twice, they've used menu twice, and it's very hard to understand. In my head, I've just decided, and this could be completely wrong, that menu is a noun and navigation is a verb. So the menu is the object and navigation is the thing that you're doing. You are navigating via the menu. That's kind of where I've landed. I don't know if that's going to work or not.
But the problem with nav as well, of course, it's a sort of technical role. It's a landmark in accessibility, so it stands for something itself. So it's not so much a verb in that sense. Anyway, sorry. But
if you think about it, if you go to a restaurant, you're never going to say, "Can I have the navigation?" You are going to say, "Can I have the menu?" Which, if you like, then is a series of links, for want of a better word, things that you can get to. In other words, a plate of food arrives at your table. But navigation is what you do when you receive the menu. Like, you sort of navigate around and your finger decides, I'm going to go look at this one for a bit, and I like the look at this. And so the navigation is the doing, the menu is the thing that you hold. And like I said, I don't know if that's going to hold water.
I want to go off onto a tangent.
Sorry.
No, with menus, there's a thing that's annoying me about menus when you go into restaurants now. I don't know if this is happening in the UK. It's happening in India quite a lot. You go in and you ask for the menu and they don't give you that. You have to get your smartphone out.
Oh,
yeah. You have to, and then you have to navigate through. Anyway, sorry.
Honestly, I could go on because the whole 10 minutes would disappear. Okay, so where are we at there? So you've done that. There's just a little paragraph which I don't know got explored. A menu to a developer has a specific role. To a UX person, it may define a pattern.
So it's just what I was talking about then, and I was just putting them up for those who can see where they are defined there. So anyway, so we can use these words interchangeably. There's a lot of those that come up. Should we talk about the types of navigation we've got? And this is why I think they're so bloody awful and confusing. I think we've known this forever. I think the Nielsen Group, way back probably in the 2000s, talked about how dropdowns were terrible usability. But we have the main link navigation or menu bars, we know it, these kind of things that we expect to see often on the top right of a desktop application, where we'll see home, about, contact, services, etc. That main navigation. Then we have navigation now that's being activated by the hamburger icon. Sometimes everything is hidden behind the
this is becoming really common. I think even on desktop, it's just the normal visual cue is, where's the three lines? Okay, that's where all of the site navigation is happening inside of that.
And I mean, there's a point to make on that. I've listed it there on hamburger. So so you're getting that, but you typically finding those on the mobiles anyway to save space on those. We've got breadcrumbs, of course, which is a sort of sub menu. But then when we get to sort of drop downs, terminology again drop as two separate words with a hyphen between it, or to join together for one thing, but also we've got other terms for this. But drop down on hover, which you see, which is a terrible idea. You can do that with CSS, can't you? You can actually hover over.
That's quite common.
It is quite common, but it's also terrible because keyboard users are completely lost. They can't use it any longer.
They can't, access it.
So,
right.
So it's not accessible. And then we've got the drop downs on click, which is obviously the better thing. I mean, drop downs on hover is often there, but creates all sorts of usability issues anyway, which we'll move on to. Drop downs on click and hover, so both will operate. We've got adjacent icons concealing a drop down to a submenu of a main item, which can be confusing, which also can be activated by the main item on hover or click. So we've got all these possible combinations of things about how that could use. how it could work, even though
Yep.
it looks the same to the user. Then we have, of course, the nested or multi-level drop-downs, which I think are dying away now because of mobile, difficulties with that one, where they used to fly out.
Yeah, we seem to be more in kind of like the drop down, something akin to accordions, don't we? So things are nested beneath other things, especially on mobile. It's just one thing under another. It doesn't sort of fly out in a separate,
Yeah.
slightly, I don't know, floated right a little bit. That doesn't seem to be happening quite as much. Yeah.
We used to see a lot of that. And then we got the mega menu, which was supposed to be
Oh
some kind of
boy.
solution to all of this.
Mega menus can be like an entire website, like they fully take over the entire viewport. Where,
Yes.
and in a sense, you just think, well, what do I do with that? Just so many choices. And how would you navigate through that with the tab key? I literally don't know. So
Well, yeah. Well, again, I mean, if you go down the route of a proper application and use menu, you can use arrow keys. So it is potentially possible to do it, but a lot of work with JavaScript,
Mhm.
So, so we got that. And terminology, haunts us again here. Hayden Pickering points out in, I forgot what it was. I think it's Accessible Components, a sort of a book of his, that drop downs is the behavior we'll get with HTML select and options, So that's really where that term's used. And so some people also refer to them as pull downs.
Yeah.
Kind of an older term. And then if we go to the W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative, they refer to them as flyouts. So
You see, that's fascinating. That one I'd never even heard. Well, I probably have some vestige of a decade or more ago, but it's a long time since I've seen anybody talking about flyouts.
yes, and that's I mean, I'm just for those
There you go,
who are
flyout
watching the
menus.
YouTube, these are flyouts according to them. So we have a terminology issue again there.
We
with that.
really do. Yeah.
But I think I wanted to list those just because I think, I don't know if you suffer, I do. I found when I die a little inside when I see a drop down menu, even a hamburger on a mobile phone, the fact that my options are hidden and I have to hit this thing, which I don't know what's going to happen with it, or it might drop down too far. I hate that. I'm not on the mobile phone much, but even on the desktop, I really hate the fact that I don't know if this top link I'm on is clickable or whether it is a button to open up a menu.
Right.
And I don't know if it's got an icon next to it, unless that animates, whether that's the place with the submenu or what I've just hovered over is the submenu. I actually get confused myself.
Yeah.
And I know how these all work.
Yeah. And I think you've taken a really interesting approach with this website, the No Script Show one, where you've essentially decided that all the menus are just going to be in the footer, for want of a better word. And you sort of jump link to that if you click what might have been considered, I don't know, the menu that flies in from the side on a mobile. You've just jumped right into the footer in a much more accessible way. I like that. That's good. Go. If you're listening to this or watching this, go and check it out. It's cool. I like it.
Well, in part 2, we'll just discuss it because
Okay. Of course.
I'll just discuss the markup on it. So we'll do that. Okay, so let's have a look. We'll talk about the code needed because we did that before on the last one when we were talking about accordions. That's needed for navigation. So straightforward. So HTML is going to give us all that we need in terms of semantics and accessible name. So we have the nav element, which is a landmark. And then if we put our A tags in a ordered or unordered list, then we're pretty good. It's going to work.
That's kind of more or less all you need in air quotes. Yeah. Nav followed by a list of A's. Okay.
Yeah. And, for accessibility, screen reader is going to read out, the number of items. So it's quite helpful there. I mean, if we add in ARIA, then we've got a more accessible way of being able to add more navigation components to our pages because we can label those up as, main navigation, secondary navigation. So anybody who wants an overview of the page, the table of contents to get around, they'll be able to see that. And also with ARIA, we can tell the user who's using the screen reader which is the current page that they're on with that.
Yep.
So that improves it. And obviously with CSS, then we can have, beautiful horizontal rather than the standard sort of vertical lineup that you would get with just HTML. And where we can also indicate current page as well with that by putting an underline when you're on that. Then if we add in JavaScript, then that allows us to create interactive show and hide, which is generally that term which we used last time as disclosure widgets, something where it's hidden is that sort of technical term. But that's where we introduce all these many different ways to fail.
Yeah. So can I ask a question at this point? So we've got 4 things which increase. So number 1 is a given. So this nav with a list of A's. That's the basics. Then we add in area for making it more readable. CSS comes in, and then JavaScript. So there are 4 things that we can do. Which of those are you attempting to use 4 in most cases, or are you? I'm guessing you're going to stop at the 3rd one, the CSS one, and ignore the JavaScript one.
Exactly. That's why I'm thinking, if I can, or the conclusion I've come to this, if I can get away with not using JavaScript, I save myself a lot of potential usability. If I can get away with being able to show the content in the correct order, then we get away from all of the difficulties that come with show and hide, I think. And
when you say, when you say get away with, what is that? A client coming to you with a particular feature, or they've described that they want something which only really JavaScript could handle, so show hide, for example?
Do you know
or is it driven by more your own head, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if? Because I had a feeling that you would always stop at the CSS point. You would never stray into the JavaScript point ever, basically, these days. But maybe you do.
I have done, and I'll show that. Actually, in the second part, I'll show you where I sort of mimicked with dialogue a mega menu, which I did with our client, which I thought was a good idea. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's interesting because I have had a client, and it was probably the most difficult project that went on for just years and years, who had a very specific idea about how things should open up on this menu, and I had to get somebody in who knew JavaScript to do what they did. And effectively, I took myself out the equation and let them talk to and they were so upset because, of course, they hadn't been able to explain to the JavaScript. The JavaScript person gave them exactly what they asked for, but they hadn't worked out that, oh, no, this is supposed to close when this happens.
Right. Okay.
On top of that, what they didn't know about that was the fact that, and I wasn't so aware as I am now, is that, of course, they hadn't thought about the usability for keyboard users, for screen readers, for any of those things. So yeah, generally I will avoid no script show. Obviously, it's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? That we try to avoid. I already mentioned the little subnote here that we can hover with CSS, because by saying that we can show and hide, we can do it with CSS, but keyboard users can't use that, so it's not accessible. And it's difficult as well on touch devices as well. If you're on a mobile, it doesn't necessarily always work if you use hover.
Okay, so now a slew of 4 different problems that we can have in terms of navigation. So UX design, SEO accessibility. Let's start with UX.
Gosh. Yes. So UX. Well, I think the points I put here, and the menu bars often look similar but behave differently. That's my experience with going to home. About I don't know if something's going to drop down, how it's going to drop down, whether I click on the top thing or the submenus, blah blah, confusing. We can't click on things we cannot see, which I think is one of the biggest faults of hide and show with this one. Is that, well, if I don't know there are some drop down stuff there visually, I'm not going to go to it, so I'm going to miss those pages.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, where mega menus kind of come in, because they show all the things, but equally they then give us a bit of overwhelm. So,
well, presume as long as you know there's a mega menu there. So if it's combined, it often is. It's like, so you can if it's not there in front of you, you're not going to click on it. So I think that's a bit of a problem. Easy drop down solutions make sloppy site architecture easy too, and that's from my own experience of working with people, because working with WordPress, it makes it so easy for you to have the sort of menus that you want with various drop downs. But of course, working with other people who don't want to do the thinking about how things are laid out, they can just drop anything wherever they like, and that solved it up in the menu somewhere. So you get all sorts of bizarre stuff going on. Some really confusing stuff goes on with menus sometimes. What's in a drop down is not what you expect,
Yeah, and it's also the interface of WordPress makes it just trivially easy to drop in possibly
Yeah.
too much, or nest things within nested things within nested things. And before you know it, you've got this collapsing menu of 9 different layers. And
Yeah.
on the back end, that's just offered. So why not use it? There's no hint that that's kind of weird on the front end.
Yeah. We need to really indicate that our links are what they are and what they do. If they go to an external site, there should be some clue. There's usually a visual thing, which I'll show in part 2.
Yeah, that's very. You tend to see that on obsessively HTML, CSS focused websites, but not much elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
you really don't see that being deployed broadly across the internet. An external link is just, well, it's guesswork. If I click this, what's going to happen? No idea. Yeah.
I mean, luckily, screen readers will largely announce for them, but it's for your sighted readers, and PDFs as well, and other things that people put in their menus. They should indicate what you're going to get when you click on something. It's so annoying if you click on something, you think you're going to navigation within the site, and you're downloading a PDF,
and you're in some sort of silo that you,
drop down on hovers can interrupt a user's journey to another target. So often, there's some articles about this, and you just think, again, this is a complication. When you're hiding and showing and you're heading off to one part of your menu, but you touch the other part of it, and it opens up instantly if it's an instant hover. So the solution that people invent, and this is where you think things are getting complicated. They think, well, let's delay this.
Let's add a half a second delay here. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of the website, but this has happened to me on multiple occasions, and it's profoundly annoying. Because in some situation, I really can't remember, but I have had a situation where I literally couldn't overcome that problem.
Yeah.
In that I was on a device of sufficient width that my mouse could not get to where it needed to go unless I took this very precise kind of 1 pixel route around things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and it's just, it's just some confection of the width of my device that I was using, and the way that I was currently located. Yeah, this is and again, you're solving it with a weird JavaScript based time function. Just let's add half a second, that'll fix it. Well, yeah, it kind of will, but maybe there's an underlying problem there.
Yeah, and when you think about it, a lot of the reason you want this to be available there is because people don't like to click onto a new page because they have to wait for it to load because of all the JavaScript you put in your menu. but these days, I think we can get faster loading sites. So why not just go to a flipping new page? If you have to delay someone's hover, it's sort of, you think, have we just lost the plot a bit with this?
I'm guessing from all of this that you do not like hover. You want click in all the menus, right? That's what
I do.
Yeah.
And I was I did this practical accessibility course with Sarah Suadam, which I'll mention because there's some of our examples I'm going to use there. And she's another one who hates she says she advises against any hovering, but of course it's common, hover and click, give everybody everything. Anyway, so that's one problem. We've got so many here. Hide and show should not obscure important information. That it's one of the rules actually that come with accessibility, is that you're not to obscure, and that's quite difficult to do that with a lot of the menus that we have that pop up. You shouldn't really. I think it's a violation of WCAG if you have what you commonly see as one of those navigations that pop up and take over the whole screen. I think it is. I think that's a violation of.
Okay. Right.
So becoming important, because this week is this is the week where accessibility laws come in. So we've got that. Disclosure widgets have an interaction cost, of course. If you're hiding and showing something, somebody has to go and click on it. So it's extra work for them to do, and that annoys me. If you don't need to, when you go to mobile and you don't need to click on something, you shouldn't have to, and it's almost standard to force you to click.
And that, dear listener, was only the UX bit. We've got 3 sections to come. They get progressively smaller then.
This is just me ranting, isn't it?
No, it's great. I love it.
Okay. So design issues now. So, there is a good article there, which I won't go to, which is really my sentiment about this. That is feeling like a tired design pattern now, drop-down menus. That it's did I mention this earlier in this chat, or was it before we recorded? But I was saying that I think, in a way that we copied print to our detriment, we've copied, if you like, the menus that are in programs to our detriment when it comes to designing navigation.
Yeah, we definitely didn't add that in to this,
Yeah.
but we did talk about it prior to hitting record.
Yeah, and
I think you're right. Yeah.
that's where I've come to with this. And I think a lot of people, if you look at a lot of modern designs, are avoiding that, but so much drop downs anyway. So I think it's probably something where we have no idea how the web's supposed to look, and we were creating it as we go. So we copied print in terms of our design, and I think we've also copied in terms of menus pre-existing desktop programs and applications as a way of dealing with menus. And I think, we're starting to move away a bit from that. But there are some, head-turning examples, which we talked about before. One of them, which is so copied, is Stripe.
This is one of the menus in particular. I think it's the product one. You hover, right? Look at that.
Oh, for those people who can't see, there were just so many options. I mean, they are subcategorized. And again, you've got this issue. If you're on your way to something, you've got interruption because on the hover, it's there. But honestly, is this the best way? I mean, it is wonderful. Technically, it's brilliant.
Beautiful implementation, like absolutely majestically gorgeous to look at. But yeah, there's a lot.
I'm a Stripe user, and I have no idea where to find what I'd be interested in here. I just want to know what I mainly use it for, taking money off people. Just give me a link and a page that does that. No,
what's curious there is they don't have a search feature embedded in their header, which is often the case, isn't it? Often these days you'll find search in the main navigation area, if not necessarily in the main navigation. But they've relegated search either to that menu, so hopefully they've given you enough to navigate to it, or maybe they've just offloaded that task to Google. They're hoping that you will choose the right set of keywords which will deep link to whichever page you actually need from Google, as opposed to doing it themselves. I mean, you can see what their intention is. I mean, they're clearly trying to make it really so that you can get to wherever you want to go in one amazing menu, but it is a lot to take in, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of, I mean, I don't really understand the icons and the fact that they changed their styling from one to the other. I find a bit confusing anyway. One of the things that I did notice on this, because the first thing I did see is this progressively enhanced. So if your JavaScript fails to load for this, the only thing you can get to is the pricing.
Interesting. So there's not a lot in terms of progressive enhancement there.
There's none, no. If the JavaScript fails, you've no menu other than the ability to pay for something.
Because it's the only one which does not have some sort of hover state. Okay.
So there's that. So I think I've just touched on one of my other points there, design. So let's have a look. So yeah, my thoughts are, and this is where I can just show for those who are on YouTube what we're doing. But
you've done such a good job with this. I noticed this morning. It's so nice.
Well, it's actually view transition. Actually, I won't jump onto this yet. View transitions, I think, is really interesting because I think it's allowing us to, it's the API that is supported now in Safari. So I think it's about 87% support for view transitions.
It's definitely the way it's going to be done. It's so graceful. It looks so nice. Yeah,
I know. And people are making like galleries and stuff where you're going from one page to the other. And one thing I never noticed until this is that I was thinking about this entirely different topic of tabs, but I was looking at YouTube and I thought when they have their tabs on YouTube that these were actually tabs, but I noticed that they take you to a different page. They take you to a different URL. So I think, I was surprised.
I looked at them. Realize that. Gosh.
No, you think it's tabs, but actually the pattern is tabs, but actually you're changing the URL. And I think that's where we're going to move a little bit towards. I think instead of, and particularly if combined with speculative loading, which again is new and experimental, but that allows you, it allows you in the sort of moderate form to say, if someone hovers over this link here, it will start to pre-render the page
or preload. You can sort of choose which way you want to go. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, and you could just do that for 2 pages, so it's not overwhelming your servers. So, I think,
isn't it interesting how profoundly unjarring it is So I should probably explain. View transitions combined with speculative loading. View transitions enables you to sort of, let's go with the example of fade from one page to another. So instead of this hard reload where everything for a brief moment just goes boom, it's going to be
this in action.
yeah, let's see it in action. So if you click on that, it maybe the way that we're capturing the video for this recording, it won't work so well because we'll probably have like a sort of fairly poor frame rate. But if you actually go to what David's looking at and click around, there's this fade between things. There you go. That was a lovely example. And combine that with speculative loading. I know it's nothing because really all that you're doing is happening in the blink of an eye, but there is something far more aesthetically pleasing about it. There's just something, like it's required now. I feel that's how it ought to be because it just feels. Look at that! It's just so nice.
Yeah,
honestly, we're really getting in the weeds there, aren't we?
But I think menus might be able to go that way. I think if you've got a big section of stuff like the services, a transition that's beautiful into a new page. I think, now that you can perhaps with speculative loading, make that page load so instantaneous and you can glide between it in an app-like way. I think that's going to change a lot of things. Let me find my notes.
Yeah, back up. There you go. Just there.
Right. Yeah. So that's my thinking. That might be the way forward with design on this one. And on our menu. So let me just move that. So I've just added onto this. So we've got a few items we need to put in our menu. And sorry for those people just listening to that, but we have a basic home. And then for our different types of content, we've got chat, learn, build, and then we've got a more, which I've now put a little icon on. And when you hover over it, slightly changes. But just to make sure, I'm just going to
reload.
Yes, I'm just going to reload and then hover down to that. And what I've done is it's got a second menu in the footer there, but because of stuff that isn't more navigation, I've actually put on the target a bit of animated. So with CSS, we can animate the target, the place you're going to. So I put a little box around it. So I don't know if you saw that.
I could see that. That was fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, but if I go back and refresh this, I'll just go back and refresh this. So the target is only showing when
you actually click.
Yeah, when I'm on the more navigation. So it looks normal. So I just think, I'm not sure what else you need really. If you've got all your menu there. And
there you go, you see. And you can imagine a scenario where somebody like Stripe has all of that information, I don't know, buried deep down on the page, but you click on the menu item and it takes you to it. And it would be, I can imagine, very smooth and interesting ways to do it, especially with the dreaded JavaScript. But I like what you did there a lot. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, so it's made me think that's probably the way I'll go with this for as much as I can. I mean, I'm sure there'll be circumstances I haven't thought about where that's just not going to work. But I just think the combination of, our fear before was making it ever present because page loads, but I think we can make them quicker and we can do nice effects to those pages. And then combined with this other idea of connecting to different navigation. So everything's present all the time. You've not got to worry about the next thing that we're talking about, SEO, which is the fact that JavaScript can possibly, we don't know, Google say otherwise most of the time, but might create some search issues. Hiding something may mean that it's not found by Google.
Yeah, and I guess really, if there's even a chance that it's not going to be found, it's probably not worth it. It's like you said, if it's hidden, you can't click on it. If it's only visible with JavaScript, Google may not see it. Is it worth the risk?
I mean, the SEO people do all these experiments and claim that things on quite as Google might say. And Google also say, I think when they talk about anything that's hidden behind JavaScript is that they will view that as secondary content. If you don't want it to be seen immediately, then that's their take on it. You've hidden it away for a reason. So it's secondary. So it will have less of importance, according to what I've heard them say. I'm no expert on this, but it's something to think about. And of course, obviously important to SEO is getting lots of clicks. People going to different pages is a good thing for them. So if we're going to hide our content, that's going to lead to less clicks. Also, if we're making them just find those links rather than go to them quickly, we're slowing down our number of clicks, aren't we? So I think there's some SEO considerations. Accessibility.
Last one.
Yes. Well, it's straightforward until we get to disclosure widgets, showing and hiding. And it just goes beyond my abilities, and I think most to kind of get the JavaScript right for this. But most checkers, accessibility checkers, they can't, because they're not working interactively. They can't pick up on the nav failures that most sites, to be honest, I started looking at sites now with a new view, and pretty much every navigation I came across was bloody awful, even though it's really big names. I know you know about this because you've got Joe Dolson, haven't you?
Yeah.
His name, and you've been
That's
doing a
right.
series
Yeah.
with him. And he's been looking at menus. So yes, that's it. So there is one thing that I thought was interesting, because we talked about it last time with accordions, is the fact there's new ability with details and summary HTML to be able to let that do the JavaScript work for us as disclosing. But technically it is possible to do that, and it be accessible. The problem is with it is how various screen readers and their combinations with various browsers decide to announce it. So they might announce the disclosure triangle. They will say that it's what it is, that it's details and some. Just what I mean. It's not ideal at the moment. Maybe I see a lot of accessibility experts testing it out all the time to see if that might be an option for the future. So if we want to drop down, maybe details in some way, maybe the way. But at the moment, it seems like a bad idea. As I covered before, I think if we use the role of menu, which a lot of people do, there's we have to add in the support for using space, escape, arrow, all things that we don't get when we're just with our links. So it's generally, I think, 99% of the time, I think the usability experts will say, well, you don't bother there unless you're building a desktop app. Don't get into that. But there is a great example. If I just brought this up.
That was it. The third tab along was the one that loaded.
I got this. So there is this accessible menu, which is on accessible-mega-menu at .netlify app. I don't know the people behind it, but they have done all this where you've got all the shifts, tabs, space, enter, escapes, home, and then all of these keys will work on their quite beautiful menu here. And
I looked at that, and honestly, I couldn't have differentiated it from the Stripe one visually. I mean, obviously they haven't leaned into all the icons and the border radius and the all of that, but it's all there, right? Every single thing is there. But I did wonder how much of a tax in terms of time this was. Probably rather a lot.
Yes, and also, I mean, you go this route. I mean, I wouldn't be using it if I just borrowed it and tried to use it as it is. It's using Tailwind, something like that. I wouldn't want just CSS. But also, even though this is perfect, it may have some things that will confuse people. So people often, when you get an open up here, they might be expecting, because they don't know what mode they've gone into to have a close. So effectively, the screen readers will have gone into a sort of desktop menu type reading of it. So maybe it's not such an issue. But for those who are not, you might expect to see a close, because you're not expecting you can now use your keyboard to get out of this.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a legacy problem there. That's fascinating.
But it still can confuse some users, which however perfect this might be, and difficult to do.
Essentially what you're saying, David, is there's no right way of doing any of this.
Exactly.
So conclusion, I guess.
Conclusion is, well, I've given it, I guess, no surprise for our show, that I think wherever possible, we should avoid scripts, really. If we can get away with our navigation with simple HTML and CSS, it makes life a lot easier. I don't know if that's always possible, but we're definitely going to try for that, no?
Yeah. Who would have thought a show called The No Script Show? Who would have thought they'd avoid using a script? But you've also made a couple of links there to the Web Accessibility Cookbook, which is available as a, I guess, Kindle, but as well as, a regular paper book in many, many different formats. But also the course that you've been talking about recently, rather a lot, actually, the Practical Accessibility course. There's some links over at noscript.show/21. Just navigate to the bottom. There they all are.
We'll talk about these because I'll show some of them examples when we go to our YouTube section. But I think probably for the audio, we're done, aren't we?
Okay. In that case, I will bid you farewell, and we will see you very soon for the sort of code example session. So thanks, David. That was fascinating.
Enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.